Welcome to the Q4 Industrial Buyer Pulse from Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carmen Perry. Carmen, how you doing, mate?
All is well. And yeah, look, folks, today what we're trying to do is really just kind of peel back the curtains a little bit of the industrial buyer pulse, give you a sense of what the findings were in Q4, and kind of peel the layers back a little bit, I guess, to see what's underneath some of that data, or what are we seeing in addition to it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this is the second edition of our quarterly research report, and tell us a bit about the structure of that and how you framed that up.
Yeah, we've been this started back in about halfway through 2025. So we've done the Q3 2025 edition was our first, and then this most recent one in Q4. So it's really intended to be a bit of a brief snapshot, if you will, of what is the current sentiment of industrial buyers, somewhat writ large across supply chain, plant managers, executive team members, as well as engineering. How are they feeling about buying confidence? How bullish are they about the quarter ahead? And how are they researching and evaluating suppliers and making decisions? What tools are they using? Yeah, so we've partnered with IMR research out of California to conduct this field work. And in this recent edition, I believe it was 258.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Folks that we've interviewed. So typically spanning both the U.S. and Canada. Of course, more respondents out of the U.S. So that's really what the Buyer Pulse is all about. And we do track some consistent questions wave over wave. Mm-hmm. 4 of the 12 questions that we ask basically do not change every wave, just so we can kind of track some of those core measures of things like buying confidence. But then there are other questions that we introduce into each that are unique and give us some unique insight into what buyers are thinking and how they're making decisions.
Very cool. Let's dive into some of the questions that maybe one of the ones that carried over from the previous report that we're tracking kind of quarter over quarter. What highlight would you like to pull out there to kind of get started?
I mean, look, the budget confidence measure has not changed a lot. It's still quite bullish at a 0.48 confidence index, and that's on a scale of like +1 is as confident as you can be, and -1 is as unconfident, I suppose, as you can be, and 0 would be neutral. So a 0.48 is showing quite strong buyer confidence, which is to suggest that people are looking at the quarter ahead saying budgets are going to go up, money's going to be released, we're going to be buying. And, Jeff, I guess the biggest surprise out of that is just all of the other macroeconomic reporting that we're seeing. I mean, manufacturing overall, in the last week it was reported, I think, has lost something around 70,000 jobs in 2025. So, that in combination with tariff headwinds, people may think, the confidence would be eroding.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be. I think that's the surprise if there's a headline out of that component of the research.
And interestingly, I mean, Canadians were more optimistic than Americans overall, which kind of squares with how things are going kind of macroeconomically right now. But at the same time, also we're facing more of the tariff issues.
Fair, yeah, but some of the job growth numbers, for instance, have been a little bit more positive north of the border in the last number of months. So I suppose, yeah, it does. Maybe there is some connectivity there. Yeah. Overall, it paints a picture of a surprising amount of resilience around buyer confidence. I just wouldn't have thought coming into Q4 that we'd be still be seeing that. So.
Yeah, and it's good. This is good news for suppliers.
Yeah, yeah. It while there are some employment headwinds and other things that we're seeing, it doesn't necessarily seem to be cooling activity as
Right.
broadly as you might think. Again, some of the PMI numbers and things of that nature are not particularly great lately either. So this is just one measure of many.
A lot of the spending priorities that we're seeing, kind of driving that buyer confidence, we expect those to kind of tend towards those automation and production equipment things. So, what else are we seeing there around, where people are looking to spend their money this year?
Yeah, I mean, look, it showed pretty broad base actually. I mean, 'cause even the largest category for investments that was indicated was automation and robotics. Um, uh, but still, the lowest QA and test and inspection. Um, it's
Still
not.
31%.
Yeah, exactly. So when asked which areas were most likely to see increased spend, it was fairly broad in the response. But we are seeing automation, robotics, and production equipment rise a little bit more to the top. Um, I don't think you can draw too much from that unless you're an automation robotics provider or a production equipment kind of. If that's your business, then you should maybe be a little bit more excited about it or know that things are going into a bit of high gear. But I don't think it necessarily means that if you're not on in those areas that you should be
Yeah.
cooling your jet, because that's not what the data shows.
No, there's clearly desire to purchase in just about all categories.
Yeah,
So.
and it shows that maybe this is connected to what we're talking about from a labor force perspective, in that we are looking to manufacture more. We're not necessarily looking to do that with more people. We're
Right.
looking to do that via more automation, more robotics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, that will come up again later when we talk a bit about AI. In terms of, what's making people decide to move ahead with a particular supplier? What are the triggers that accelerate a green light?
That was one of the cool, I thought, was one of the cool questions of this bit of
Yeah.
research, where we were looking at, you know, a decision you want to take. It's not like we're saying what creates a green light from a red light.
Right. Yeah.
We're more like, this is something an organization wants to do, but what makes them take that final decision, sign on the line that is dotted, and actually get it moving and make that investment. And proven payback ROI surfaces number one, and actually supplier guarantees or delivery guarantees surfaced as number two on the list of green light triggers. Which, I mean, in some ways, the idea of, okay, well, can you do it? Yes. Well, how much is the price? Okay, we understand how much. Now, can you prove to me that you've done it for others? That's not new. The idea of case studies or ROI driving a level of acceleration of a deal is not surprising.
No.
I want to kind of talk a little bit, and maybe we'll go off script here for a while, about what's on the lowest end of this, which is executive mandate came in at a whopping 3%.
Which is kind of counter to what we hear from a lot of buyers and manufacturers, is that they think that they need to have executive buy-in in order to move a project forward.
Yeah, and there's also these bigger notions of, I think probably the biggest example that actually has come true in some way is safety. When it comes to workplace safety, industrial safety, the idea that has to start at the top and be a corporate priority is something that's talked about often, and frankly, I think has surfaced as a main priority for a lot of executives. They do hold that up. It's kind of in some ways one of the measures most directly attached to the plant floor that they care most about.
Right.
Some outside of production targets and things that actually make the money, I suppose. But it's funny because everybody wants their product or their thing to also occupy that space in the executive's mind, and then be mandated from the executive top down as something they ought to do.
To create a culture of something.
of whatever, right? We want a culture of quality. We want a culture of speed. Who knows? But I mean, we've all heard it, and it's like, what I thought was so interesting is that you know, first off, I think as we imagine that, it's very hard to get to a place where something is as important as, say, safety might be to people. And so even if you could get to that executive mandate stage, well, I guess I would argue, can you get there with whatever it is you sell? And then the research shows that the destination may not, like the juice might not be worth the squeeze here. It may not be a great place to be since it's the least motivating green light trigger. So that's what I
Interesting.
found fascinating about that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've been pursuing that and trying to get to the C-suite because you think it's the only way your deal is going to get done, maybe you might want to refocus on some case studies that prove your ability to do that. I want to dig into something, because we asked a related question in the Q3 Buyer Pulse around the differentiation provided by supplier guarantees or things like that. So I find it interesting because in that report, it wasn't necessarily seen as a differentiator, but clearly what we're seeing here with 29%, importance to people, it still matters. You still have to have that in order to potentially help drive a deal through.
Yeah, some of the Q3 research kind of more pointed. It is nuanced, there's no question, but I think it was pointed a little bit more at saying, or indicating that people weren't that concerned about on-time delivery. Like they weren't expecting that their suppliers were going to miss delivery.
Right.
So as opposed to during COVID, we saw a lot of concern about whether delivery times would ever get met. So I guess what we extrapolated from that is in some way, if people aren't that concerned about it or are not facing those fears, then guarantees may not be that motivating. But maybe that's not, one may not beget the other.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it interesting how there's some crossover there, and
sure,
maybe it doesn't necessarily suggest that there's absolute alignment between those two types of how you think about that and how you value it at different stages in the buying process.
Yeah, one is talking about a bit of a fear-based motivation, where others is an acceleration. Is maybe just different. Yeah.
Interesting indeed.
If we look at the pre-contact shortlisting, this is one area that we have continued to research quarter over quarter, and this was pretty much indicated the same. About 83% of respondents say they placed at least one supplier on a shortlist before speaking to them live, almost unchanged from 82% in Q3. So
clearly this is a thing, and I mean, to me, this is. It's only been 3 months since the previous report, but to me, this is one of those things that kind of blows your mind a little bit, that something is happening before you even know you're in the race. And, how can you, as a manufacturer, ensure that you are getting shortlisted before you receive contact?
To ensure that you're shortlistable pre-contact.
Exactly.
Because it's going to happen, so whether or not you're shortlistable is really the question.
Yeah. And what are the factors that determine that?
Well, everything from can they actually find out information about what it is you sell online in a reliable way and an up-to-date way. I mean, depending on your business, there's lots of ways, obviously, that you can become shortlistable. But it does fundamentally mean if it's happening pre-contact, it's happening more digitally than it is via a salesperson relationship. And I think that's the thing to be most mindful of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but when that conversation does actually happen, we did ask the question, well, what was the first point of contact then? What do you use to reach
and
it?
I think the Gen Zs and millennials in the audience are probably not going to like the answer.
Well,
it's old reliable.
Yeah, it kind of changed a little bit, like depending on on who you're speaking to. So I'm not sure that we would have assumed that plant managers and those more operational roles would be as driven to email as they indicated, because they seem like people where, handshakes and pressing the flesh actually matter more.
Yeah.
In some way. However, that is the point, and I think maybe it speaks to a bit of asynchronous reality of their world. They can't necessarily meet with people.
Not in the same way that an executive might be able to. Yeah.
Right, potentially. Whereas the executive and those types of roles indicated a preference for phone-based communication.
Yeah.
Which was, just okay. That's the piece that the millennials probably don't like, to your point.
Well, and I think, too, it certainly speaks from a traceability and an accountability perspective. You need to be tracking inbound calls as well. You need to be ensuring that these things are being recorded into your CRM so that you have the ability to actually attribute a particular piece of revenue to when that relationship started, and when the lead showed up via phone or via email, and that those things are actually being recorded as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it through, okay, if our phone or email-based communication is actually post-short list but pre-contact, how do we script it differently? How would we, what experience would we want to deliver there?
How do you curate that?
Yeah. And can it be, can there be different threads, different journeys that you expose to executives versus other members of the buying committee or what have you that kind of more align with these preferences? Yeah. The research doesn't point to a one-size-fits-all answer. It more, if you were to download the paper and dig a little bit more deeply into the data, you may then begin to imagine how you may shift some of those nurturing sequences or alter some of those customer journeys to better reflect these communication preferences.
Well, and not just the communication preferences, but understanding just how well equipped that buyer is going to be when they finally do reach out. Keep in mind that you may have already been placed on a short list, which means that people most likely have used your digital presence to get a quote or check timelines on delivery or anything like that using digital tools. So there's a whole bunch of other things that could happen before somebody even shows up, makes that phone call, sends that email. But you need to be ready.
The knowledge of the competition may well be different and more advanced.
Potentially, yeah.
A lot of things to consider there. I think when we hear sometimes about the 80-some-odd% being shortlisted pre-contact, you kind of, if you're being a bit cynical, you might say, yeah, but these are all incumbent suppliers, right?
They've already done business with us.
They're pre-contact, yeah, but they always do business with them, or they've they're already the standard spec, for instance, for that particular thing. So that's why we wanted to kind of ask about in this bit of research, what are you doing as an industrial buyer? How frequently are you choosing new suppliers? So we asked people in their most recent significant purchase, basically, who won? Was it an incumbent supplier or was it new? This data surprised me.
I think what I saw there was a message of hope, for people looking to break into relationships or break into enterprise deals that maybe they weren't able to do before. You got a solid third of a chance, that you could do this. And, the differentiation, as we talked about in some of the other areas here, may be the thing that tilts the balance in your favor.
Yeah. That was exactly my takeaway. I mean, because I would have thought it would be incumbents would face a harder time. So yeah, it's not as uphill a battle as I would have thought.
Yeah.
I guess, which was I guess good for them. Maybe bad news for the big guys that are
Could
generally
be.
incumbents. I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyway, interesting to consider. And even in established categories, it's important to remember that there are new people winning deals. It's not always going
Yep.
to the established providers. What else do we got, Jeff?
Well, let's talk about how we're enabling buying in a digital manner, because this is still very interesting. We had a similar question in the Q3 2025 report. This notion of who's using AI to do research. Who do you think?
Yeah.
It's everybody.
Yeah, I think that's we started this question because, frankly, we thought the answer would be lower.
Mm.
And
We'd
that
have room
we
for
would
it to
watch
grow.
it grow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we end up dropping this question from waves at some point, because it's basically coming out to almost fundamentally 100%.
Yeah.
Of industrial buyers are acknowledging that they've used AI to research suppliers for major purchases.
Well, it's up 7% in one quarter from 85 to 92.
Yeah.
And in Canada, it's 99%.
Yeah.
And 100% of C-level and VPs use it.
Yeah.
So who's left?
Well, the data does show that the usage on the plant floor with managers that are closer to the plant floor is less.
That's going to drag, yeah.
And some people, I've kicked this around with some of the data analyst folks that have worked through the responses to this. And one of the curiosities that they have is they wonder if there's a less willingness for those more frontline managers to admit to using AI. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that power dynamic's strong enough to actually come through in the research or not, but it's about the only strong explanation I would have.
I think it still feels like you're trying to read into it, and it's really hard to be sure why. Maybe it truly is. Managers are lagging at only 83% compared to 100% of C-level.
But
VPs.
still, only 83.
Yeah.
It's still.
It's like saying I only find results via organic search.
Right. It just shows. It's here. It's now. AI is happening for supplier research. So if most marketers are in the business of trying to be found when somebody's researching a supplier, and it's absolutely critical.
Yeah. So you need to be, your content needs to be machine readable. If you're not familiar with what schema is, talk with your web developer. Have it implemented across your site so that all of your products are marked up using appropriate schema. This way they can be found by machines. Content that's in Q&A type format. Let's be honest, a lot of that hasn't necessarily changed from how we, did content 15 years ago when inbound was still new. Like you were answering questions via blog posts at that time and Google search was finding you. Well, now it's the same thing. It's just you're not talking about topics at a high level. You need to get more precise with your content in terms of how you answer the questions.
Yeah, I think probably, I don't know, I feel like in some ways maybe the more accurate way to say it, because I think folks that claim that optimizing for AI is basically about leveraging the same best practice that you use for optimizing for organic search.
Oh, I didn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah, no, I know, and I want to just distance from it a little bit because I think, there are differences, but there are similarities and learnings from one that port to the other. Like, it'll look pretty similar, and you're right. The notion around focused answers to specific questions, even answer first communication is really rewarded by AI. That's something that I don't know we would have thought about in the same way for, say, a search optimized blog post.
No.
Whether or not the answer comes in the first paragraph or not is kind of irrelevant. In fact, some of that long form content was,
Worse than reading a recipe website.
yeah. So, so there are differences, but I think we can learn from lessons from one apply to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the areas that this quarter's research looked to dive into further was as we look at DIY, that digital self-service that industrial buyers are doing. Can we quantify that? Can we wrap our arms around what are the types of things that they're doing in digital DIY? In some ways, what are the things that they may be doing pre-contact to put us on that short list or what have you, so that we can begin to align marketing and sales investments, digital investments, around those jobs to be done. And that was an area where there was some interesting findings.
Well, I think, one of the things that's truly interesting about it is that on average, buyers did at least 2 of these things before involving sales. So that could be checking inventory online. It could be getting a price quote online.
Those are the 2 biggest ones, actually.
Yeah.
That inventory check or price/lead time. Really do over-index. I think it's important for people to know.
Absolutely. I mean, the next one down, though, at only a few points behind, 41%, a CPQ, a special configuration of a product or a solution. These are not basic tools, but the fact that 40% of buyers have used one of these, if you don't have one and your competitors do, that could be the difference. That could be one of the things that gets them shortlisted.
I don't know if you agree with me here, Jeff, but one of the things I thought was strange was that the compliance document downloads and like a CAD download were kind of middle of the pack.
Right.
And those are arguably more commonly found across industrial websites, I would suggest.
Pretty hard-working.
And so more people have them. I would have just thought it would be a little bit more surface to the top of the behavior.
Yeah, potentially.
So it's not to say that that's not important. It just surprised me that people seem to really be craving those more advanced digital experiences and reporting that they've recently used more advanced digital experiences. So if you're looking at your web presence and saying, well, I don't have any of those things, but my competitors do, well, they're getting used.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if they're not finding out if you have inventory, they're finding out if your competitors have inventory.
Exactly.
But, yeah, those are, considering more digital tools is not necessarily going to be a bad thing as part of your strategy. So,
and begs the question, however, if you're a salesperson watching this, you'd be saying, well, what's in it for me?
What's my role?
Yeah, when do I come to play? So we looked at that as well. What are the human required steps in the digital, in that buying process that maybe has a number of digital components as well? So when asked which steps still require human contact from the supplier for them to proceed confidently, some interesting findings there as well.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, and a lot of these are rated, these top 3 are within a few points of each other. So, they're looking for validation that what they've configured is accurate and viable and actually the solution to what they're looking for.
I've done the online configuration or what have you, but I need final verification from you personally that
it will fit.
That this works for my thing or whatever.
Yeah, they're looking for pricing in terms.
Makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And they want to know at this stage, do you have the documentation around compliance and quality and all of that needs to fit into their systems.
So painting a picture really of a compliance check in some way almost coming a bit after the fact.
So maybe that speaks to why it's not such an important piece as part of the pre-sales contact, but comes later because they want to make sure that what they're choosing is the right thing, and then they want to make sure that it's compliant. Yeah. I think the most interesting finding, maybe not the most interesting finding here, but certainly one of the most interesting findings is that less than 1% of people said that, no, I don't need to talk to a salesperson at all. What I got digitally is sufficient.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know if that's surprising to me though, because I think for most of the things that these buyers are buying, um, there still does require that a level of human assurance. I guess connected to that though is where that other human is. Are they in person in front of you or not? And so many sales teams see the in-person visit as the gold standard, and they really feel like buyers want to see them in person. On-site assessments ranked dead last in terms of something so it does need to happen. So 23% or so said I need somebody, an expert, to come on site and make sure that this will work or what have you, do an on-site assessment. So I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying the thing that many salespeople would suggest is the most important thing.
Their relationships.
Their relationship, and they go on site.
Yeah.
They do that work. Maybe some of that is transitioning to more digital-based relationships where a video call is fine,
Yep.
or what have you. Showing an evolution in buying behavior for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Pretty interesting.
And it's also interesting to think about when you're designing these customer journeys, being more intentional about where the human handoffs are.
Yeah.
And even connecting digital components to the journey with like you can imagine a CPQ process where you get the final output, and then as part of that, a meeting with an application engineer is automatically booked at the conclusion of that digital process, so that we know that there's a human contact that's required here as part of this journey. So let's build it in intentionally and insist upon it rather than wait for them to request it. Things like that.
And train, sales engineers or others who are capable of having both that interaction with somebody, but also with the extensive product knowledge that's expected of somebody at that stage. Yeah. We asked people to let us know what their top 3 or up to their top 3 logistics related challenges caused the most disruption to their operations in the past quarter.
And?
Well, high freight costs are still coming in pretty high, 54%. And, of course, customs and border delays, I think that's all tied to both tariffs and other issues. Certainly, providing some risks to folks.
Yeah, showing that the supply chain, like logistics related challenges, are reasonably broad based.
Yeah.
There's no one thing that's weighing on them dramatically more than others. I mean, it really paints a picture of these supply chain logistics people navigating a very complex world right now, and there's a lot of things that they need to be mindful of at once.
Absolutely, but I think one of the things about it is that geopolitical risk, for example, only came in at 9%, and I think that speaks to a supply chain that is continuing to go about its business and continuing to, things are still getting done, even though it may seem like there's a lot of turmoil globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's important to note, especially Venezuela and other. When we think about geopolitical risks, it's easy to watch the news and then people get a little obsessed by it, or thinking that it applies to them and their specific industry maybe more than it actually does. The landscape more broadly is that people are tending to work around these things, and yes, the least concerning thing that we asked about. Geopolitical risk only 9%, where the port and rail congestion was a concern of 33%.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
just a little
real.
more closer to home and real. Yeah.
On the ground and in the water.
Exactly. Speaking of closer to home, though, I think that is probably, from a supply chains piece, it's the thing that stood out most from this quarter for me, is just how embedded near or reshored supplying has been in the last 12 months. So when we asked about taking what share of critical spend has been shifted to near or reshored suppliers in the last 12 months, the 49% selected 10 to 24%. So half of respondents said between 10 to 24%. And then you had typical bell curve, a bit distribution on the other side of that. It shows that it's happening and it's broad based, but it's also measured. And nobody's talking about shifting 75%
of their
right
supply chain back to North America,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah.
It's measured.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to know. I mean, I think it's important to know that if you're one of those suppliers that is concerned about maybe being displaced by a near-shore option or reshore option, well, you're not completely out of the game. Yeah, it kind of shows both ways. It can allay a bit of fear, and I think
and also maybe light a fire under you to consider other things.
Yeah. I do think it does point to, this is happening broadly, and therefore there's broad-based interest in it. So highlighting it in your messaging a little bit more. If you have reshored a meaningful percentage of your supply chain, that may be something that your buyers care about as well.
Yep.
So
you want to be hyping up that message a little bit in your marketing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's baked into the planning cycle. Like, this notion of reshoring isn't a speculative thing; it's happening.
It is happening. Yeah.
Well, this has been a fun conversation. I've enjoyed kind of kicking around some of the findings and research here, and we didn't go through every question.
Nope.
But I think we
Save
covered
some for the download.
Exactly. I think we saved some for the download for sure, but we covered a good chunk of it. And I hope you will check it out. I think it's a really interesting snapshot into how industrial buyers are feeling coming into the end of the year. And it gives you a lot of information to help you plan 2026. A number of the questions in this quarter's research were really designed to help you inform your work in the early part of the year as you're thinking about where your growth goals may take you. So do check it out.
Yeah, you can find the full report on the homepage at kulapartners.com. That's KULA partners.com.